With all the Street Fighter 6 roster speculation that's going on right now, we thought it might be fun to hammer down 10 characters that the community would absolutely not want to see in the game. This includes characters that just didn't work, characters that maybe have overstayed their welcome and could use some time off, and El Fuerte. This week we are talking about something that's going to piss everybody off, but it's also something that I think would piss people off. It's 10 characters that if they pop up in Street Fighter 6 would piss people off. That's what we're getting into this week. And I'm going to do something a little bit different right now and just jump into the list and give you number 1 right off the bat. El freaking
John, before we do that, can people cycle crush
No.
the like button? Because
don't do it yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Don't do it. Now you can. Because I have a power complex. Which is why I didn't like playing against El Fuerte back in Street Fighter 4, because I felt powerless all the time. He's our first character. And so if this character were to be revealed for Street Fighter 6, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that he just hasn't been a very successful entrant. And, you know, truth be told, if you go back over the Street Fighter games, there's a handful of newcomers in every game. Most of them usually aren't huge home runs. There's usually just 1 or 2 big ones, and as we'll see, that's kind of the case here in Street Fighter 4. El Fuerte was one of the most annoying characters. He deviated from Street Fighter a pretty far in that he often created a bunch of just 50-50 sort of mix-ups that you were kind of rolling the dice. It wasn't fun to try to play this. At first I want to say cat and mouse, but it feels better to say annoying fly. Like you're trying to catch an annoying fly where he's just leaping all over the place and running and doing zany stuff. And I mean, the only thing that I remember that was actually entertaining about El Fuerte, besides rooting for the chaos when Pepide was playing, and it's funny when you're not the one getting hit by it, so there's that. But also the infinite that he had was interesting because it took a lot of skill to be able to do it on repeat for a long time. After you did it a handful of times, you were only getting about 9 damage per hit. But for a player to show that they were able to do that was especially if it's a tournament match, was a kind of a cool showcasing of skill, and I appreciated that. But outside of that, man, El Fuerte was just, everybody did not like him. I mean, not everybody, but most people. What do you think?
Yeah, he's one of the most hated characters, and he had every chance at success, and a good pick here for the list.
Yeah. The point of this list is not just for me to say 10 characters I don't want to see. I've gone around and sort of through looking at social media, researching, hey, top 10 most hated Street Fighter characters, some of our old articles and such, and we've run polls asking people, hey, which characters do you dislike and why? This is trying to get an idea of whom the community would not like to see in general. And that's also not to say that any of the characters on this list have 0 fans. I'm sure there are people out there like, oh, Forte is my favorite, I love playing him, and that's totally fine, that's good. But it's more of a, if the community in general would react and hate 10 particular characters, my guess is it would be these 10. The bigger point here is let's have a conversation about it. If you disagree, let us know why, right? But so I just wanted to clarify that this is not just these are the definite 10 characters that people would hate. I'm trying to talk about the characters that people hate so that Capcom and the community can have something of an expectation moving forward into SF6. So with that, number 2, I mean, there's only one character on this list that you can put at number 2, right? Do you want to try to guess who it is?
Fong.
Nah, Ingrid. So number 2 is Ingrid. Have you even heard of this character? Not everybody has, but she actually appeared in Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max. Am I saying that right? Is that how that... this is like an extension right, afterwards. Yeah. Ingrid, I thought was a character that everybody loved in my, I joined Street Fighter around Street Fighter 4 and such, so I haven't seen much of Ingrid. She was supposed to be part of Capcom Fighting All-Stars, but that game never came to fruition. So she did appear in Street Fighter Alpha 3 Max, whatever it is. And she's like a waifu. She's super powerful. I figured, oh, everyone's loving this character. But every time I would share her, like either in an art gallery or bring her up, there would always be a comment or two about how, oh man, Ingrid, I hate Ingrid. And then she popped up, like looking through, forum conversations and like top 10 hated character lists. She was popping up. And so I kind of looked into it. And what it seems to be is that she is an unearned kind of Deus ex machina type of character. For those that don't know, she's incredibly powerful. There's not much information at all as to where she comes from or where her power comes from, but she's able to deal with Bison in all of 15 minutes when everybody else is seeing him as this ender of the entire universe, or, life as we know it, kind of opposition. She's like, "Oh, Bison, I'm going to do some ballet and take him out really quick." And it's kind of just this cavalier thing. And you fall into the world of, like, Captain Marvel in the Avengers, where she's just so powerful that it doesn't really match up. And, like, who cares? It becomes moot because she's able to fix everything with a snap of her fingers. And she hasn't really earned that. She doesn't have much character arc, so she becomes this Superman. And one of the articles that I was looking up that brought her up as a negative character, I think pretty correctly identified her as a Roman Reigns type character. And for those that, there's a lot of overlap in the fandom of WWE, or I should say professional wrestling, and the FGC. But for those that don't know, Roman Reigns is just this character who's like a Superman. He even does the Superman punch. It's one of his go-to moves. But where they just decided to make him this unbeatable badass. I think John Cena falls into this category to an extent too, where he hasn't really earned his status. He just is propelled to the top, and all of a sudden he has this godlike powers, and no one's really interested in, because you're not overcoming adversity and such. And so, although she's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it
waifu,
reminds me of Jiren in Dragon Ball. Like,
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people did not enjoy him as a boss character because he wasn't explained like why he was so powerful or whatever. He just was. And that, for some people, the case for it is basically the mystery, right? Like, it's a mysterious character. Why are they so powerful? Why are they so this? But for a lot of people, it was a big turnoff to not have those explanations. It's kind of why we watch, entertainment, right? Is to have
Yeah.
explanations, to have, some idea of it. Mystery is important as well, but there it is.
Yeah, they could make this character very visually alluring. I'm sure they could do a good job on her, but as she exists now, she's not even like official canon. Another big part of this is that if we are only restricted to a 20 or 25 character launch roster here, they don't go the way of Super Smash Bros. And doing everyone is here. That's a totally different thing. If you put a certain character in, that means you also have the cost of not putting someone else in. And so it's like, if you pick this character over someone else who's really important, that's going to be a thing that makes people mad. And so I would hope that Capcom would avoid picking any of those kinds of characters and such. And that brings me to character number 3 on the list, Fong. Fong is a kind of a swing and a miss for Street Fighter V, a newcomer for SF5, and he has this poison mechanic that never has really worked in how I think Capcom would hope it would. It's just so different than everything else in the game that it's going to be hard to make work and be fair and balanced. It's either going to be way too strong, way too weak, and they've kind of erred on the side of way too weak. Outside of that, the character has been a nightmare to fight against, despite not being very strong, but he's kind of goofy and weird, and most of us still don't know his frame data and haven't been motivated to learn. I don't know. Some of the onus is, of course, on the individual for not, but man, Fong hasn't been like someone that you want to see pop up in the game. And people that play him, the few that actually do, I mean, they're not celebrating anytime. They're like, yeah, it's really fun. It's like, this is always a grind, and it's always really hard, and Fong's always at disadvantage. And we're like, well, we feel like we're at disadvantage when we fight him, and nobody's happy. And beyond that, he's kind of this weird, eccentric character, and it doesn't really come together. Sometimes he seems like a formidable foe that could absolutely murder anyone, and is in, second in command at Shadaloo, and he melts a scientist in the story mode, and you feel like, oh, okay, so he's kind of a force to be reckoned with. But most of the time, he's just kind of screaming and flailing, and he's not all that threatening. He's just weird.
He's a weenie. Like, that's the big problem about him. Like, and he's one of the main villains. Like, I can't think of any like main villains that have been well received by fans when they're that much of a weenie.
Yeah.
Like, it's like now, if you're gonna have a joke character, like I look at something like C-3PO from the Star Wars franchise, and he's a weenie character as well, but he's not one of the main things. He's a comic relief kind of character, and like Fong is second in charge of Shadaloo. Shadaloo is like the biggest, baddest organization, or was until this point in the timeline, and to have him up there, it really was a bad. He's such a flop. I'm so disappointed in what Fong is. The best thing about Fong is Mono playing him. Like, and all the other people who played him like that did really well with the low tier character. Like, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when that's the best thing about your character, you really failed on the design.
Absolutely. And if they wanted to keep pushing this idea, like fair enough, but do it through Phantom, Fong's apprentice, which they've written about and we've talked about in another video. Don't do it through Fong. And also, he's totally
Yeah.
Jar Jar Binks for the Star Wars comparison, right? Like, just
Yeah.
no way around it. So certain characters that are going to be like, okay, you got your non-negotiables like Luke and Chun-Li and I'm sorry, did I just say Luke? I meant Ryu and Chun-Li. Luke is not a non-negotiable. He's going to be in Street Fighter 6. But Ryu, Chun-Li, Ken, those types, like if they weren't in, people were going to riot, right? And then there's a bunch of characters that they've got a decent amount of charisma. They've got their spot at the table, but they can get tired. And sometimes the distance makes the heart grow fonder. You want them around, and then you should just take a break for a game or two. And then when they come back, people are like, oh, yeah, I remember that character. And let's see how they've evolved and what they're like in this newest game and such. But there's an excitement about them because you don't want them around all the time. They get annoying, they get tired. But, in groups, or I'm sorry, in little windows, in little seasons, they're good. And this next character doesn't fit that exactly, but it's Blanca, and I do think that we've had enough Blanca for a while. He was in Street Fighter 4, he's been in Street Fighter 5, and the character, I don't I don't think he was originally intended to be this, but he has certainly become a troll-like character more than anything else. When people see Blanca, they think, nah, original Street Fighter 2, and I think that's the main reason we continue to see him, because he contributes to the overall complete picture of, oh, now we have almost all of our Street Fighter 2 characters, and that's cool on a character select screen, I get it. But, man, if he's a troll character, it hasn't boded? It hasn't been good for him. I think the community, like, he's got his fans and people that play him and people that like trolling people, but ultimately, we've run two polls on which are the characters that are most frustrating. One was done in 2013 and one was done in 2016. So admittedly, both during the Street Fighter 4 years when people's minds were most, tuned to Street Fighter 4. And Blanca won both of them. It was specifically online Street Fighter 4 Blanca. It was the most frustrating or least liked character to play against. And he's been that in Street Fighter 5 pretty much as well. He's never been a good character here. All he's really had was that initial release where, like, oh, cool, Blanca's here. He should be here because he's Blanca. But then it's like, hey, V Trigger 2 is like a kind of goofy comeback V Trigger, robbery almost in certain ways, and like that's all he really does. And so he's just existed as this joke. And if the frustrating joke to most people, like the joke's kind of on us, I would like to see him take a back seat. I don't want to see him in this next game. I want that position or that spot to go to somebody else. And then when they bring him back, I would hope that they would try to take this character in a different direction. I get that he's not a Shoto. He's not a traditional kind of Street Fighter character, and so it's kind of hard to make him, play as nice with others. And so maybe they went the route of making him a troll because that was easier than trying to balance him along with the rest of the cast, possibly. But I would like to see them try to make Blanca more of a legit character in the future after they take a break in Street Fighter 6.
I completely disagree. Blanca's pretty much always been a troll, and like that's what he should be. Even in Street Fighter 2, like his rolling attack, it would actually it would do, if you like uppercutted him out of it or something, like it would do double damage. And so back then it's like a really big deal. And so Blanca was not the best of characters usually, and even in Alpha, like he would like knock fruit off of trees and then he'd be able to kick it around at you and do stuff like that. So he's always usually designed around being a joke, and kind of that fits him, and like being friends with Dan and all this other kind of stuff. And I think his place at the table is exactly that. But you only want so many joke characters in here. If you've got Dan, like, do you need Blanca right away? And the answer to that might be no. It's Blanca has his fans, and I think he needs to continue the support. But I'm also he wins the most hated character award pretty much every time out because he's a troll and because he does this crazy ass stuff and then shouts at you while doing it, which is really annoying.
But it's almost endearing in that, like, you're supposed to like that about him, and I'm tired of trying to supposed to like that about him.
Yeah, I get the frustration with Blanca. If he's added as a DLC character later on, I think that's a good idea. Unless Capcom's got a very clear vision for how to troll with him. And I think in this era, like, I mean, we knew it with Sean. Like the developers talked about making a handicapped character that was just purposely bad, and that's why they made Sean. That isn't a reason to put Blanca in Street Fighter 6, but I don't think we really need that in this day and age anymore, because organically, with the tier list on EventHubs and everywhere else, there's plenty of weak characters to go play. Unintentionally, that Capcom tries to make good and does not make good. So we don't need Blanca.
Sorry, but you heard it here first, guys. Next up is another Street Fighter 4 newcomer. It's DeCapri. Now, DeCapri admittedly probably got a bad rap because of the execution of developers in Street Fighter 4. She probably could have been better, almost everything the same, if there was a little bit better handling of the communication about who she was going to be so that expectations weren't so off when she was actually revealed. But she's really close to Cammy, and Cammy's probably got to be around. But at the same time, Cammy makes a lot of people mad too. So her proximity to Cammy's probably a thing that people don't like about her, and people are tired of Bison clones
Yep.
and the dolls and such. And so, if anything, if you're gonna do a doll, do one that we haven't seen before, and do them up different and kind of distance from the traditional idea of the dolls, because that's a tired trick at this point. If we saw DiCaprio again, I think there would be an overwhelming groan and a big old eye roll, and it's like, all right, fine. It's like, eh. So I just don't see her as resonating very well. It's just like I say, tired, and you could do a different doll and have a lot better, achieve a lot of the same things and have a lot better of a reaction from the community.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of DiCapri, and I agree with everything you said. I played DiCapri a little bit in Street Fighter 4. I think she's an interesting character.
Hmm.
There's good stuff going for her, but it's also like if you have the choice between like DiCaprio or Makoto, you have to go Makoto. If you have DiCaprio or Dudley, you have to go Dudley.
Oh, right.
It's like it's just you as you mentioned, you've got Cammy in there, you've got other doll. We have seen this before, and if we've seen this before and it hasn't really caught on in the community, that's a very loud and clear message to Capcom. Don't do it again. Why would you? Kind of thing. Unless you just know what you're doing is gold. Why go there again?
Yeah. Well, with this next character, I think that you could say the exact same thing. It's Rufus, again from Street Fighter 4. Visual design, people really didn't like this. He's the fat, dumb stereotype of an American. Not too worried about the American stereotype part, but fat and dumb in Street Fighter just doesn't really seem to work. He was frustrating to play against. The people that played as him, you got your Justin Wong, Ricky Ortiz, Brent. There were some cool moments because those players were good and because they had some interesting tournament settings. But ultimately, people were not happy to fight Rufus. They didn't like his design. I recall Maximilian doing an entire video, I think, dedicated to it was either dedicated to how much he hated Rufus or that just the characters he doesn't want to see back, and Rufus was like number one on that. But just if you saw him revealed again and you go, we're getting Rufus instead of, and then insert your wish list, I think that the people would be really upset by that, and it would be a big oversight by Capcom. There's so many good characters to put instead of Rufus in here. It just would not. I can't see that going well, and I gotta say sorry to Brent, but sorry, man.
Yeah, dive kicks are one of the most hated moves in Street Fighter because they help circumvent footsies and other stuff like that. And Rufus is the best dive kick character I believe they've ever designed. You already have plenty of really good dive kick characters to work with. There's kind of no reason to bring back Rufus for all the reasons you just said.
Well, and he was amazing because his dive kicks were done at like shin level and then would lead into stuff. And nowadays, that's an obvious oversight at this point. We'd go, if you gave that to a character, we'd laugh at you and say, you're overpowering them from the start. Stop that. Quit it. But
Capcom did also make G. So
next on the list is G. No, just kidding. But it is a Street Fighter V character. Did you have any more you wanted to say about Rufus?
No, it's all good, man. Keep
Good. Next one up, Falk. Some people have warmed up to Falk a little bit, but here's my thing with Falk. She was first revealed, and she was underwhelming because the animations in the trailer were like, what is this? This is just, people, she didn't click with people. Then she was underwhelming because she just could not perform. And just another Bison clone again, right next to Ed, same character in terms of like, they're not the same character, but they're both easy input for beginners, blonde Bison clones that are from the same little organization and whatnot, and they're both underwhelming and both having a hard time getting the job done in game. Falk has been, I don't know. She can be, if she needs to be part of the story in the next game, which maybe she and Ed need to be. First of all, only include one of those two. Please don't put both of them. That's just my own request. If she needs to be part of the story, fine. And maybe a DLC character later on or something like that, fine. But man, I think that Falk could take a time out. They should really think about how to make her a fun character to play that's enticing and that gets people going, and then bring her back after some time. But she could definitely spend some time on the bench, and I would have no issue with that. In fact, if she doesn't, I would be a little upset, and I think that the community would too.
Yeah, the buy somebody clone thing, as you mentioned before, is just a really big thing here. They really mailed in what they did with her story and kind of like how she was implemented. And when you have a brand new character that falls flat, that's a really bad idea to bring them back unless you again have a great idea for them. And the only case I could really see for Falk is the easy inputs. I do think are a nice thing to have in Street Fighter, and that could kind of be one of her bases there. But again, you've got Ed, who's just way better done. Like he has a better song, he has a better everything, he has a better history. Like if you're gonna bring back an easy input character, bring back Ed and do it that way.
I was thinking the same thing, and I don't want to see either of these characters personally, but if it's got to be one or the other, I'm like, well, I think people would like Ed a little bit more. I think he's got more playtime, more exploration, that he's more motivating. So him instead of her, but maybe they'll do both, and that would suck. Uh, now we talked
Bring
about
back Street Fighter 5, John. No one gonna be mad at that. So
next character was probably supposed to be Street Fighter V's poster boy. It was my main for forever. It is Necalli. I still have a sense of faith in Necalli. I would like to see him reinvented, and because he's got so many cool parts that just don't connect to one another, and it's probably pretty close. Like they could just spend a little bit of time, figure him out, put him back together in the right way, and maybe he could be that awesome character that I think all of us know he could have been. But man, he was super hype when we saw that trailer, and then it's just been a since, and Capcom hasn't really done anything, at least nothing successful to get us to care about him again. They get little extra moves here and there, but widely his kit just doesn't work together. And now he's fallen off so hard that we almost never see him. And on tier lists, even though he's got some clear strengths, people are putting him into like the non-relevant tier. And I think it's not because I dare say it's not because of how weak or strong he is. It's because they don't care about him. It's because it's like he's not relevant. It's almost like they're starting to feel like he's not part of this game. Most recently, I think this happened on like Punk's tier list, and so. But like when the character's fallen that far off, and we haven't seen any potential for him to grow in his evolution in Street Fighter V, if they were to bring him back in Street Fighter 6, everyone would go, on what justification did you do this? What were you thinking when you did this without some massive change? So take a game off at least, reinvent him, maybe bring him back then. But if he were to pop up on the launch roster or Street Fighter 6's roster almost at all, I think people would be very upset.
Yeah, Necalli's a really interesting character because he was overpowered like for probably seasons 1 and 2, and
Hmm.
then in the latter seasons he got kind of like midish tier. He was still playable, and then now he's like very low tier, and so he's been all over the map. And despite him being at the top, like he was never a popular character. A lot of people played him, and they're like, well, he's still a boring character. He's still not well designed and other stuff. And that's interesting because a lot of the other characters we're talking about, they were either low tier throughout their life, or high tier throughout their life, or something like that. Necalli has been all over the map, and yet he still never caught on. And that's just it's such a bad look for a character to be where Necalli ended up at. It sucks because he should have been so much more.
Hmm.
There's I love his like a Halloween costume where he's like the werewolf kind of thing. Shouts to the Backstreet Boys that we would troll John with. We get the everybody thing up there, and like one of the guys is like dressed like a werewolf. And we're like, that's Necalli, there you go. But anyway,
I
yeah,
was the
man.
emotional one.
When we have to compare Necalli to the Backstreet Boys, that's no good. Sorry, Necalli. We don't want you back.
Um,
Backstreet's not back. So
and there's going to be something of, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of Street Fighter 4 and 5 characters on this list so far, and I think a big part of that is because one, they're freshest in people's minds, and so their sins or their shortcomings are also going to be freshest in people's minds, and that's not fair, but that's also where we're at. So I think a lot of people are going to be upset with a lot of these characters just because of that. Also, the community has surely grown since the days of Street Fighter 2, 3, Alpha, all that stuff. We had this huge boom for Street Fighter 4. So a lot of the people that are playing now probably haven't played much Alpha or much Street Fighter 3, and so they would be completely maybe apathetic or such, but they wouldn't have much reason to hate characters from those previous games as much because they haven't experienced them. And so that's just going to be a truth of what's going on right now. But again, we're trying to figure out where the community stands in terms of characters they wouldn't want to see revealed for SF6 right now, and the point in time that we're at, the factors around where we are right now in the timeline are relevant. So I wanted to throw that in there. And that brings us to a Street Fighter 3 character, although I will say that I think it's because of her performance in Street Fighter 4 that she's on this list, and that is, of course, Elena. We still have an open wound that hasn't healed from Elena. And, we all know the stories of her being a pain in Street Fighter 4. She had these weird, wonky hurt boxes where she was breakdance fighting and she became Eddie Gordo. And you couldn't hit her and you couldn't punish her in certain ways, and that was really frustrating. And then she could heal, so you couldn't throw fireballs at her, and she was a big problem. And then the game kind of ended, so she's still that, but we just didn't have much time to sit and kind of think about it and soak it all in. I've never seen, as I think about it, I've never really seen a pro Street Fighter 3 or Third Strike match where Elena was seriously used. I'm sure that she is, but you almost never see her there. So I gotta wonder, I'm not from the Street Fighter 3 days, how popular was Elena back then?
Not very popular at all.
Yeah.
She was on the lower part of the tier list, and just you almost never saw her in tournament because why would you get good with a low tier character when Chun-Li existed?
Fair enough. But so she was kind of meh in Street Fighter 3, and then she was a huge issue in Street Fighter 4. I'm sure you could design her in a successful way where she meshes well and she doesn't have all the issues that she's had. But man, I still think another game, take a break from Elena and then maybe reinvent her again. Come back in SF7 with her if you want. You don't have to. You could take more time off with her, but man, especially Street Fighter 4, you started at an apathetic level and then you went into hate zone, and that's where we still are. So no, Elena.
Yeah, get her out of the game.
Yeah.
The only thing I will throw out there, the one thing Elena has going for her is a healing mechanic, which no one else has. But that's actually one of her biggest problems because Capcom has not figured out how to do that and make it balanced and interesting. And so that is a one thing where it's like, man, if they could figure that out, maybe they could put Elena in there, but I don't have faith in Capcom to be able to do that properly because they'd make her healing like a V skill or something like that if they put her in Street Fighter 5.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to explore that. You could do where if she goes into a mode and when she hits you, she gets also some life back, but maybe that's too powerful too. But it would force her to fight instead of go away, because it's V trigger stuff. I don't want to get too far into how I would design Elena. That's not the point of this.
We already know so early on that if Capcom tries to do these crazy mechanics early on, it's usually a bad idea because they don't know what the game is yet. They don't know how it's going to evolve.
That's a good point.
And so you see more interesting characters added on later in these games usually because the developers really understand what the community is doing and how to design those characters at that point. So if you take a risk with someone like Elena early on, what are you doing?
Same thing with Fong. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't kick it off with some safer bets. That's a really good idea. I might have to write an article about that or something. But yeah, let's start off and not take crazy, weird, risky shots with new mechanics and stuff until later on when you have a much better idea of what your game is. I like that. I'm stealing that. The last character on this list was actually going to be Abigail. And that wouldn't be from me, but in my research around, I kept seeing Abigail's name pop up. But then it turns out it was more because he was what he was in Season 3, which became this overpowered, hulking 50-50 guest character that we all remember in our nightmares, where it was, do you want to take the damage from blocking, or do you want to try to get out and take even more damage? And then, here comes, a guest that... It was a hard time.
John. Yeah, the solution was to let Abigail punch you in the face.
Yes.
It was like Dream King. Oh gosh! And when Dream King sees this, he's probably gonna light up our comments area and just be like, ah. But anyway, he was like, well, I told you, just let me punch you in the face. That's how you beat Abigail.
Meaning you block and take the scale damage.
But he's doing an unblockable on you. And it's like. That is so dumb. That's the solution, but that was the solution. That it was basically just easier to take it in the face and let him hit you and combo you and guard break you than it was to try to even be able to avoid that mofo. Like, why? Why? But thank goodness they fixed it. But
They
yes.
did. They did. And
Yeah.
now he's an interesting, like he's the biggest character in the Street Fighter universe right now. And like that's kind of cool. He's like this bruiser brawler sort of thing. And I see regular Abigail play and I think he's pretty entertaining. And so I really think that people were still reacting to season 3 Abigail. And so then I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, so that's something. And that they really had a misstep, but they've been fixing it. There's another character that I immediately went to that's sort of like that. And that is actually this number 10 character is Rainbow Mika. Rainbow Mika also had similar levels of BS back in season 1, where she had, Oki for days and set play. And then in her neutral, she was getting to her really strong stuff by doing a bunch of gimmicky, like, am I going to drop kick? Am I going to hold it? Am I going to jump? Am I going to cut it short with a splash? And if you're wrong, the punishment is you're dead. And also, well, you're into the mix-ups and the resets.
No, you're dead. You're dead. Mika's not letting you out of that one. You're dead.
Yeah, and when she could get the off the wall from anywhere on the screen. She didn't have to be next to the corner to get it. Her V trigger was even better, and the setups were you were just guessing for your life, and it wasn't fun. And she could even get you into those situations by V reversaling you. So if you were on offense and she blocked a heavy attack, she V reversals, and now you're in a mix up where she has Oki, and it could be the end of the game for you or the end of the round at any moment. So there was that. Then they nerfed her into oblivion, and we haven't heard anything from her since, widely speaking. Fudo's tried to make her work, but he's ventured off into a handful of other characters. There's a little bit of Mika play, but she went from extremely annoying and overpowered to not relevant overnight and really hasn't bounced back. She was Ono's favorite character. Ono's not with the company anymore, and it's like Mika has her fans. She's bubbly and whatever, yeah, but she should take a game off, at least a game off, because she was either a pain or she was just like non-existent, and that's just not a good look for the character. So give her some time in the on the bench.
Yeah, her moveset is interesting enough for the right game. I don't know if you're gonna find an easy game that she's a fit in, like Street Fighter V. Like a Street Fighter V Grappler Fighter 5. Like she fit that game. And that's about the best I could say for her design and her approach on stuff. I'm not going to be sad to see Rainbow Mika not come back, although I love her voice actress. She's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
She does such a great job with the performance, and it's really fun to hear Mika, spout off the nonsense and all that kind of stuff. I enjoy her as a caricature. It's like she's very funny, but that's about the best I can say for her. I pretty much hate her gameplay every time out. She is a wild character.
Yeah. So this is our list. This is my list. Also, John hadn't seen this before. This was all new for him too, so he's reacting right along with you guys. But this is the list of 10 characters I think people would most hate to see in Street Fighter 6. Comment and let us know. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Again, this is more about the conversation. I don't think this is 100% accurate. It's my best guess based on a little bit of research and my own intuition. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. It's like, oh, did I miss something? Let us know in the comments. Share it, and let's get this conversation going.
Yeah, let us know. Oh boy, that was the worst finger direction ever.